The rain pattered against the windows of the small apartment as Audrey Ortiz carefully counted the crumpled bills in her wallet. $37. That had to last until Friday's paycheck from her job at Murphy's auto repair shop. She tucked the money away and glanced at the clock. 6:47 a.m. Time to get ready for another day of changing oil, fixing transmissions, and enduring the surprised looks of customers who didn't expect to see a woman under the hood of their cars. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Audrey pulled her long dark hair back into a ponytail and slipped on her worn work boots. The apartment was quiet. Her younger sister Maya was still asleep in the bedroom they shared. At 26, Audrey had been supporting both of them since their parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. Maya, now 22, was finishing her senior year at prestigious Riverside University, completely unaware of the sacrifices Audrey made daily to keep her there. As Audrey grabbed her keys, her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "My friends are coming over tonight for dinner. Can you pick up some groceries? Thanks." Audrey stared at the message, mentally calculating whether she could stretch her $37 to cover groceries for Maya's wealthy university friends. These weren't just any friends. Maya had fallen in with the elite crowd at Riverside, kids whose parents owned tech companies and real estate empires. Audrey had met them once before, and the way they looked at her grease-stained hands and modest clothes still burned in her memory. She typed back, "Sure thing. What time?" "Around 7. And Audrey, maybe you could, clean up a bit? Wear something nice?" The message stung more than Maya probably intended. Audrey looked down at her faded jeans and work shirt. This was her life, her reality. She worked 12-hour days fixing cars so Maya could attend university with kids who had never worried about money a day in their lives. At Murphy's Auto Repair, the morning flew by in a blur of oil changes and brake inspections. Tom Murphy, the 60-year-old owner, watched Audrey work with admiration. She was the best mechanic he'd ever hired, better than guys with twice her experience. But he also noticed the way she seemed distracted today, checking her phone more often than usual. "Everything all right, Ortiz?" Tom asked during their lunch break. "Just thinking about tonight. Maya's having friends over." Tom raised an eyebrow. He'd met Maya once when she'd stopped by the shop, and he'd immediately noticed the tension between the sisters. Maya seemed almost embarrassed by where Audrey worked. "Those university kids giving you trouble again?" Audrey shrugged. "They're not bad kids. They just live in a different world." What Tom didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Audrey had once lived in that same world. Before the accident, before everything changed, she had been on track for something completely different. But that was a lifetime ago, and some secrets were too heavy to share. After work, Audrey stopped at the grocery store with her limited budget. She carefully selected items for a simple pasta dinner, counting every dollar. At the checkout, her card was declined. The cashier, a teenager with purple hair, rolled her eyes impatiently. "Try again," she said with obvious annoyance. Audrey's face burned with embarrassment as she removed items one by one until the total came down to $35. The people in line behind her were getting restless, and she could hear whispered comments about people who shouldn't shop if they can't afford it. Back at the apartment, Audrey quickly showered and changed into her only decent dress, a simple black one she'd bought for their parents' funeral. She started cooking, hoping the smell of garlic and herbs would mask the lingering scent of motor oil that seemed permanently embedded in her skin. Maya arrived home at 6:30 with 3 friends in tow. There was Brandon Wells, whose father owned a chain of luxury hotels, Sophia Chen, daughter of a prominent tech entrepreneur, and Marcus Thompson, whose mother was a famous entertainment lawyer. They all looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, wearing clothes that cost more than Audrey made in a month. "Hey guys, this is my sister Audrey," Maya said. "Audrey, you remember Brandon, Sophia, and Marcus." "Nice to see you again," Audrey said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Brandon glanced around the small apartment with barely concealed disdain. "The cozy place you have here." "Thanks, dinner's almost ready." As they sat around the small dining table, the conversation naturally turned to their lives. Brandon talked about his internship at his father's corporate headquarters, Sophia discussed her upcoming study abroad program in Switzerland, and Marcus mentioned his acceptance to Harvard Law School. "What about you, Audrey?" Sophia asked, with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "What do you do?" "I'm a mechanic," Audrey replied simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon actually choked on his water, and Marcus looked like he wasn't sure if she was joking. "Uh, mechanic?" Brandon repeated slowly. "Like, you fix cars?" "That's usually what mechanics do," Audrey said. Maya jumped in quickly. "It's just temporary, right, Audrey? Until you figure out what you really want to do?" The words hit like a slap. Audrey looked at her sister, this person she'd sacrificed everything for, who was now ashamed of the work that kept her in university. "Actually, I'm pretty good at what I do," Audrey said quietly. Sophia leaned forward, her expression a mix of fascination and pity. That must be so difficult. I mean, being a woman in such a male-dominated field, and the working conditions must be awful. "It has its challenges," Audrey agreed. "I bet," Marcus said with a smirk. "It must be hard to find a boyfriend when you smell like motor oil all the time." Maya laughed, actually laughed at her friend's cruel joke. The sound felt like a knife twisting in her chest. "Marcus," Sophia said with mock seriousness, "don't be mean. I'm sure there are plenty of nice blue-collar guys who would be interested." "Oh, absolutely," Brandon chimed in. "Mechanics probably make decent money. What is it, like 30,000 a year? 40?" They continued talking about her as if she weren't sitting right there. Their voices became background noise as Audrey felt something shift inside her. She'd endured their condescension before, but watching Maya participate in it, that was new. "Well," Brandon said, standing up and checking his expensive watch, "this has been educational, but we should get going. That new rooftop bar downtown is having a private party tonight." "Sounds amazing," Maya said, already grabbing her purse. "Audrey, thanks for dinner. Don't wait up." Just like that, they were gone, leaving Audrey alone with the dirty dishes and the echo of their laughter. She sat in the silence of the empty apartment, staring at the business cards scattered on Maya's dresser. Cards from internships and networking events that Maya attended while Audrey worked 60-hour weeks to pay for her lifestyle. Audrey walked to her laptop, an old model she'd bought secondhand years ago. She had emails to check, invoices to review, and reports to read. The same ritual she performed every night after Maya went to bed, the same secret she'd been keeping for 3 years. As she opened her laptop, her phone buzzed with a notification. Maya had posted photos from the rooftop bar on social media, all smiles and champagne glasses. The caption read, "Living my best life with the best people. #blast, #university life, #future leaders." Audrey stared at the photos for a long moment, then closed the app. She opened her laptop and got to work, just like she had every night for the past 3 years. The soft glow of the screen illuminated her face as she reviewed reports, analyzed market trends, and made decisions that would affect thousands of people across multiple industries. Outside, the city hummed with late-night activity. Somewhere out there, Maya was laughing with her friends, completely oblivious to the truth about her mechanic sister. Somewhere out there, Brandon was using his father's money to buy drinks for people he wanted to impress. Somewhere out there, Sophia was posting photos of her privileged life while looking down on people she considered beneath her. But here, in this small apartment, Audrey Ortiz was building an empire, and none of them had any idea what was coming. The next morning would bring new challenges, new humiliations, and new tests of her resolve. But it would also bring her one step closer to the moment when the truth would finally come to light. And when it did, the people who had mocked her, dismissed her, and treated her like she was invisible would discover that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. For now, though, Audrey worked in silence, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she shaped the future that none of them could imagine. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The morning sun streamed through the apartment windows as Audrey prepared for another day at Murphy's Auto Repair. Maya was still asleep, probably nursing a hangover from her night out with her wealthy friends. A half-empty bottle of expensive champagne sat on the kitchen counter, a gift from Brandon that probably cost more than Audrey's weekly groceries. At the shop, Audrey threw herself into her work with unusual intensity. She was underneath a 2018 BMW, replacing a transmission, when her phone rang. It was an unknown number with a Manhattan area code. Audrey Ortiz speaking. Ms. Ortiz, this is Jennifer Walsh from Pinnacle Industries. We need to schedule an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. The Henderson acquisition is moving faster than expected, and we need your final approval. Audrey glanced around the shop. Tom was in his office, and her coworker Jake was busy with a customer. I can't do it this afternoon. How about 8 p.m.? 8 p.m. on a Tuesday? Ma'am, this is a multi-billion-dollar deal. 8 p.m., Audrey repeated firmly, then hung up. Jake wheeled himself out from under another car, wiping his hands on a rag. Hot date tonight? He joked. Something like that, Audrey muttered. Later that evening, Audrey sat in her small apartment with her laptop open, connected to a high-end video conference system she'd set up in the corner of her bedroom. On the screen, 12 executives in expensive suits stared back at her from a mahogany-paneled boardroom in Manhattan. To them, she was just a voice and a carefully positioned camera that showed only her face. The Henderson acquisition will give us controlling interest in the Southeast market, Jennifer Walsh was saying, but they're demanding a 48-hour decision window. Audrey studied the financial reports she'd already memorized. What's their debt-to-equity ratio post-merger? 1.3 to 1, but we project significant cost savings through integration, replied Marcus Hoffman, the CFO. Too risky. Counter with 35% cash, 65% stock options, and a 5-year performance guarantee. If they refuse, walk away. There was silence on the call. These executives, each earning 7-figure salaries, were taking orders from someone they'd never met in person, someone they assumed was calling from a corporate office, not a cramped apartment above a laundromat. Ma'am, with respect, Henderson Industries has been a target for 3 years. Walking away now? Would save us from a company with declining margins and outdated infrastructure, Audrey interrupted. Trust me, make the offer. After the call ended, Audrey closed the laptop and rubbed her temples. Tomorrow, her decision would affect over 10,000 employees across 4 states. But tonight, she had to figure out how to afford Maya's textbooks for next semester. The irony wasn't lost on her. Maya stumbled into the kitchen the next morning, looking like she'd barely slept. God, my head is killing me. Brandon bought this ridiculously expensive champagne last night, and I think I overdid it. Maybe you should eat something, Audrey suggested, not looking up from her instant coffee. Can't. I'm meeting Sophia for brunch at the Meridian Hotel. She wants to introduce me to some guy whose dad owns a tech startup. Maya paused at the mirror, applying lip gloss. You know, someone with actual prospects. The dig was subtle but unmistakable. Audrey watched her sister check her appearance one more time before heading out, probably to spend more money she didn't have on a meal that cost more than most people's daily wages. At the repair shop, the day took an unexpected turn when a sleek black Tesla pulled into the bay. The driver was a woman in her 40s wearing a designer suit and an expression of mild panic. Are you Audrey? The woman asked, approaching cautiously. That's me. What can I do for you? I'm Catherine Morrison. My assistant said you're the only mechanic in the city who knows how to work on Teslas without taking them to the dealership. Audrey nodded. She taught herself electric vehicle repair through online courses and technical manuals, skills that were becoming increasingly valuable as more luxury cars went electric. What's the problem? It just started making this horrible noise, and I have a presentation to investors in 2 hours. If I'm late... Catherine looked genuinely distressed. Audrey could see the Tesla's registration. It belonged to Morrison Tech Solutions, a company she was actually familiar with from her other life. Let me take a look. The problem was relatively simple, a faulty coolant pump that was easy to replace if you had the right parts and knowledge. Most shops would have told Catherine she needed to tow it to the dealership and wait 3 days for service. I can fix this in about an hour, Audrey said, but I'll need to order the parts and it's not cheap. How much? $800 for the part, $200 for labor. Catherine didn't hesitate. Do it, please. This presentation could make or break my company. As Audrey worked, Catherine paced nervously, making phone calls to investors and employees. Audrey couldn't help but overhear fragments of conversation about market projections, venture capital, and expansion plans. It was like listening to a foreign language to most people, but to Audrey, it was familiar territory. You know, Catherine said during a lull in her calls, most mechanics would have told me I was out of luck. Most mechanics don't understand electric systems, Audrey replied, not looking up from her work. Have you ever thought about starting your own shop? Someone with your skills could make a fortune specializing in luxury electric vehicles. Audrey paused for a moment. I've thought about it. When the repair was finished, Catherine's relief was palpable. She practically threw the money at Audrey and rushed off her presentation. Tom, who had been watching from the office, shook his head in amazement. That woman just paid you $1,000 like it was pocket change, he said. You really should think about what she said. Your own shop, specializing in high-end cars. You could probably charge twice what we charge here. That evening, Audrey was reviewing quarterly reports when Maya burst through the door with her friends in tow. Again. This time there were more of them. Brandon, Sophia, and Marcus, plus 3 new faces she didn't recognize. Audrey, Maya called out cheerfully. We need to use the apartment for a study group. Is that okay? Before Audrey could answer, the group had already invaded her small living space, spreading textbooks and laptops across every available surface. She retreated to the bedroom, but the walls were thin and she could hear every word of their conversation. This place is so cramped, complained a new voice, a girl with a slight accent. Maya, why don't you just get your own apartment? I'm working on it, Maya replied. My sister helps with expenses now, but once I graduate and get a real job, I'll be out of here. What does your sister do again? Asked another new voice. She's a mechanic, Sophia said with a laugh. Can you believe it? Maya's going to have a business degree from Riverside, and her sister fixes cars for a living? That's actually kind of cool, said the accented girl. My cousin in Germany is a mechanic, and she makes really good money. Please, Brandon scoffed. We're talking about real careers here. No offense to your cousin, but there's a difference between blue-collar work and professional success. Exactly, Maya agreed, and Audrey felt her heart sink. I mean, I'm grateful for everything Audrey's done, but I have bigger plans for my life. The conversation continued, but Audrey had heard enough. She put on her headphones and tried to focus on the acquisition reports spread across her desk. Tomorrow, she will decide whether to purchase a manufacturing company in Ohio that employs 3,000 people. Tonight, she was listening to her sister apologize for her existence. Around midnight, the study group finally dispersed. Maya knocked on the bedroom door before entering. Thanks for letting us use the place, she said. I know it's not ideal having all these people over. It's fine, Audrey replied without turning around. What are you working on? You're always on that computer. For a moment, Audrey considered telling her the truth. She imagined Maya's face when she learned that her lowly mechanic sister was actually the CEO of one of the fastest-growing conglomerates in the country. She imagined the shock, the disbelief, and then the inevitable questions about why she'd kept it secret. But then she remembered Maya's laughter, echoing with her friend's cruel jokes, her casual dismissal of Audrey's sacrifices, her eagerness to distance herself from the person who had made her education possible. Just work stuff, Audrey said finally. Well, don't stay up too late. You have to work in the morning. After Maya left, Audrey stared at her reflection in the blank computer screen. In a few hours, she would be back at Murphy's Auto Repair, changing oil and rotating tires. Her hands would be dirty, her clothes would smell like motor oil, and people like Brandon and Sophia would look at her with pity and condescension. But they had no idea that the woman they mocked was about to make a decision that would reshape entire industries. They had no idea that her temporary job as a mechanic was actually the most honest work she'd ever done. And they had no idea that their time of ignorant bliss was about to come to an end. Because Audrey Ortiz was tired of being invisible. And when people like her stopped hiding in plain sight, the world had a way of changing very quickly. The invitation arrived on expensive cardstock paper, delivered by a courier in a pristine uniform. Maya held it up like a trophy when Audrey walked through the door after a particularly grueling day at the shop. "Look what came today," Maya squealed. "Brandon's father is throwing a charity gala at the Grandview Country Club next Saturday. Black tie, silent auction, all the biggest names in the city will be there." Audrey glanced at the elegant script on the invitation. The Grandview Country Club was where she'd attended dozens of similar events in her other life, though always remotely through carefully orchestrated video calls or through trusted representatives. "That's nice," Audrey said, heading toward the shower. "Nice! Audrey, this is huge! Do you know who goes to these things? CEOs, politicians, celebrities. This could be my big break into real society." "I thought you were focused on your studies." Maya laughed. "Studies are just the foundation. It's all about connections in the real world. People like us don't get opportunities like this every day." The phrase "people like us" hung in the air like a challenge. Audrey wondered what Maya would say if she knew that people like them were exactly the type who typically received such invitations. They just didn't know it yet. "What are you going to wear?" Audrey asked. Maya's excitement faltered slightly. "That's actually a problem. I need something really spectacular, but everything decent costs at least $1,000. I was hoping maybe you could help me out. I know money's tight, but this could change everything for my future." Audrey looked at her sister, this person she'd raised, protected, and sacrificed for, asking her to spend money they couldn't afford so she could impress people who already looked down on them both. "I'll see what I can do," Audrey said quietly. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to Murphy's Auto Repair. A woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, stepped carefully around the oil stains as she approached the service counter. "I'm looking for Audrey Ortiz," she said to Tom, who was manning the front desk. "She's in Bay 3, Tom replied, gesturing toward the back. The woman made her way over, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. Audrey looked up from the engine she was rebuilding, surprised to see someone so formally dressed in the shop. "Ms. Ortiz, I'm Elizabeth Hayes from Hayes & Associates Executive Recruiting. I have a rather unusual proposition for you." Audrey wiped her hands on a rag, her mind racing. Hayes & Associates was one of the most exclusive headhunting firms in the country, specializing in placing executives at Fortune 500 companies. "I think you might have the wrong person," Audrey said carefully. Elizabeth smiled. "I don't think so. Catherine Morrison recommended you. She was quite impressed with your work on her Tesla, but more importantly, she was intrigued by your insights about the electric vehicle market during your conversation. We barely talked about business. Yet, you demonstrated more understanding of market trends and consumer behavior than most MBAs. Catherine thinks you're wasting your talents here." Audrey glanced around the shop. Tom was pretending to organize invoices, but was clearly eavesdropping. Jake had stopped working entirely and was listening with undisguised curiosity. "What kind of proposition?" "There's a position opening at Meridian Automotive Group. They're looking for someone to head their new electric vehicle division. The salary starts at $200,000, plus bonuses and stock options. With your technical knowledge and apparent business acumen—" "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested," Audrey interrupted. Elizabeth looked genuinely puzzled. "Miss Ortiz, this is a life-changing opportunity. You could go from fixing cars to running an entire division of a major corporation." "I like fixing cars." After Elizabeth left, Tom approached Audrey with a mixture of pride and concern. "You know, she's not wrong," he said. "You're the smartest person I've ever hired. Hell, you're smarter than most of the people who own the cars you fix. If you want to take an opportunity like that—" "I'm not going anywhere, Tom." That evening, Audrey sat at her computer, reviewing the financial reports from her latest acquisition. The Henderson deal had closed successfully, adding another $500 million to her portfolio. Her companies now employed over 50,000 people across 12 states, and the quarterly projections showed continued growth in all sectors. She was interrupted by Maya rushing into the apartment with shopping bags from high-end boutiques. You'll never believe what happened, Maya exclaimed. I was at the mall looking for dresses, just window shopping really, when I ran into Sophia. Her mother owns that new boutique on Fifth Avenue, and she offered to lend me a dress for the gala. Maya pulled out an elegant black evening gown that probably cost more than Audrey made in a month at the repair shop. It's beautiful, Audrey admitted. Isn't it? And look, Maya produced a small jewelry box. She's lending me these diamond earrings, too. They're real Cartier. As Maya tried on the dress, chattering excitedly about the upcoming gala, Audrey's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Ortiz, this is David Chen from the mayor's office. We understand you'll be attending the Grandview Charity Gala. His Honor would like to schedule a brief meeting to discuss your recent infrastructure investments. Please confirm your attendance. Audrey stared at the message. Someone had connected her real identity to the gala invitation, which meant her carefully maintained anonymity was beginning to crack. She typed back, I won't be attending. Maya, Audrey said, interrupting her sister's excitement, what exactly is this charity gala for? Oh, it's for some foundation that builds schools or something. Brandon says it's really just an excuse for rich people to show off, but the important thing is networking. And you're okay with that? Using charity as a networking opportunity? Maya paused, looking genuinely confused by the question. Audrey, that's how the world works. These people donate money to feel good about themselves, and people like me get to meet them. Everyone wins. What about the schools, the actual charity? Well, obviously that's important too, but let's be realistic. I'm not going to change the world by boycotting a party. I might as well take advantage of the opportunity. The next day at work, Audrey was replacing the brakes on a delivery truck when her secure phone rang, the one only her most trusted executives had access to. We have a problem, said Jennifer Walsh without preamble. Someone's been asking questions about your identity. A private investigator was nosing around the Manhattan office yesterday, claiming to represent a client who wanted to verify your credentials for a business partnership. Audrey stepped outside the shop for privacy. What kind of questions? The usual stuff: education, background, previous employment history. Our legal team shut it down, but whoever hired the investigator clearly suspects you're not who you appear to be. Any idea who's behind it? Not yet, but I'll find out. In the meantime, you might want to consider increasing security protocols. That evening, Maya was getting ready for another night out with her friends when she casually mentioned something that made Audrey's blood run cold. Oh, by the way, Brandon's been acting really weird lately. He keeps asking me questions about your background, like where you went to school, what you did before you became a mechanic, stuff like that. Why would he care? I don't know. He says he's just curious, but it's getting kind of annoying. I told him you've always been a mechanic, but he seems to think there's more to the story. Audrey felt the walls of her carefully constructed double life beginning to close in. Someone, possibly Brandon, was investigating her, and it was only a matter of time before they uncovered the truth. The irony was bitter. She'd spent 3 years protecting Maya from the harsh realities of their financial situation, working 2 full-time jobs to maintain the illusion that they were just getting by. She'd endured mockery, condescension, and her sister's growing embarrassment, all to preserve Maya's innocence. But now, that innocence was about to be shattered, not because Audrey chose to reveal the truth, but because someone else was digging for it. As Maya left for another night of champagne and networking with people who despised her sister, Audrey made a decision. She opened her laptop and began typing an email that would change everything. Jennifer, she wrote, prepare the Forbes interview materials. It's time to go public. The game of hide and seek was about to end, and when it did, everyone who had underestimated Audrey Ortiz was going to discover exactly how wrong they had been. The private investigator's report landed on Brandon Wells' desk at 9 a.m. sharp, delivered in a manila envelope marked confidential. Brandon had hired Mitchell Security Services 3 weeks ago, driven by a nagging suspicion that something didn't add up about Maya's sister. The woman was too confident, too knowledgeable about things a simple mechanic shouldn't understand. Brandon opened the file with anticipation, expecting to find evidence of some minor deception, Maybe Audrey had lied about her education or had a criminal record she was hiding. What he found instead made his hands shake. Subject: Audrey Maria Ortiz. Age: 26. Current known employment: Murphy's Auto Repair Shop. However, extensive financial analysis reveals numerous inconsistencies. The investigator had traced a web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and corporate structures that all seemed to lead back to Audrey Ortiz. Bank records showed deposits and withdrawals that were impossible on a mechanic's salary. Property records showed she was listed as a consultant for at least 7 major corporations. But the most shocking discovery was buried on page 12. Subject appears to be connected to AO Industries, a private equity firm that has acquired over 40 companies in the past 5 years. All major decisions trace back to an A. Ortiz who maintains strict anonymity. Brandon's phone rang, jolting him from the report. "Wells residence?" he answered absently.
Brandon, it's Marcus. You sound weird. Is everything okay? I'm fine, just working on something. Well, work faster. The gala is tomorrow night, and my mother just confirmed that Senator Richardson will be there. This is our chance to make real connections. Right, the gala. Don't tell me you're getting cold feet about the Maya situation. Look, I know her sister is embarrassing, but Maya herself has potential. Just keep her sister away from the important people, and everything will be fine. After Marcus hung up, Brandon stared at the investigator's report. If even half of this was true, then Maya's embarrassing sister was potentially worth more than all their families combined. Meanwhile, at Murphy's Auto Repair, Audrey was dealing with her own crisis. The Forbes journalist had arrived a day early, insisting on conducting the interview in person despite Audrey's preference for remote communication. "Ms. Ortiz, I understand your desire for privacy," said Rebecca Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s carrying a professional camera bag. "But our readers want to connect with the person behind the empire. The mysterious CEO angle only works for so long." Audrey glanced around the shop nervously. Tom was in the office, but he could emerge at any moment. This really isn't a good time. When is a good time? We've been trying to schedule this interview for 6 months. Your people keep giving us the runaround. There are complications in my personal life right now. Rebecca's eyes lit up with journalistic interest. What kind of complications? Are we talking about legal issues? Family problems? Our readers love human interest angles. Before Audrey could respond, the bell above the shop door chimed. Maya walked in, looking around with obvious distaste at the oil-stained environment. "Audrey, I need to talk to you about tomorrow night," Maya said, then noticed Rebecca. "Oh, sorry, I didn't know you had a customer." "I'm Rebecca Martinez from Forbes magazine," Rebecca said, extending her hand. "And you are?" "Maya, Audrey's sister." Maya shook Rebecca's hand, looking puzzled. Forbes? What would Forbes want with a mechanic? The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca looked between the two sisters, clearly sensing a story much bigger than she'd anticipated. "I was just leaving," Rebecca said diplomatically. "Ms. Ortiz, we'll continue our conversation later." After Rebecca left, Maya turned to Audrey with curiosity. What was that about? Why would a business magazine want to interview you? "She's probably doing a story about women in traditionally male industries. You said you needed to talk about tomorrow night?" "Right. So I've been thinking about the gala, and I realized this could be awkward. I mean, Brandon's father will be there, and Sophia's parents, and all these important people. If someone asks what my family does..." "You're embarrassed by what I do." "It's not that simple, Audrey. You know I'm grateful for everything, but these people judge based on appearances. If they think I come from a working-class background, it could hurt my chances of making real connections." Audrey felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So what are you suggesting?" "Maybe you could just not mention the mechanic thing if anyone asks. Maybe say you work in automotive consulting or something. That sounds more professional." "You want me to lie about my job?" "I want you to present it in the best possible light. There's a difference." That evening, while Maya was at her pre-gala planning session with her friends, Audrey sat in the apartment wrestling with a decision that would change everything. Her secure phone had been ringing all day, with calls from board members, journalists, and government officials who somehow knew she would be at the gala. The carefully constructed wall between her two lives was crumbling, and she could either control the collapse or let it bury her. Her laptop chimed with a video call request. Jennifer Walsh appeared on screen, looking more stressed than Audrey had ever seen her. "We have a major problem," Jennifer said without preamble. "Someone leaked information about your attendance at tomorrow's gala. I've had calls from the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and 3 different investment firms. They all want statements about your coming out party. How did this happen?" "We're still investigating, but it looks like someone with inside information tipped off the media. The good news is that most outlets are still speculating. The bad news is that speculation won't last long." Audrey rubbed her temples. "What are my options?" Option 1, we deny everything and try to maintain your anonymity, but that's becoming impossible. Option 2, we control the narrative by going public on your terms. The Forbes piece runs tomorrow morning, followed by a carefully orchestrated media campaign. And option 3? There is no option 3. Your cover is blown, Audrey. The only question is whether you want to control how the story comes out. After the call ended, Audrey walked to her bedroom window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Maya was planning her grand entrance into high society, completely unaware that her embarrassing sister was about to become the most talked about person in the business world. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Ortiz, I know who you are. We need to talk before tomorrow night. BW." Brandon Wells had put the pieces together. Audrey stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Midnight, Riverside Park. Come alone." 2 hours later, Audrey sat on a bench overlooking the river, watching Brandon approach through the darkness. He looked nervous, clutching a folder that she assumed contained the investigator's report. "You're early," she said without turning around. "I couldn't sleep." Brandon sat down beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "I have questions." "I'm sure you do." "Are you really—" He opened the folder, revealing financial documents and corporate filings. "Are you really worth $3 billion? The number fluctuates depending on market conditions." Brandon stared at her profile in disbelief. This whole time, Maya's been talking about how she can't wait to escape from poverty, and you're—
I'm what? You're one of the richest people in the country, and you're letting your sister borrow dresses because she can't afford her own. Audrey finally turned to look at him. "Why did you hire an investigator?" "Because something didn't add up. The way you talked at dinner that night, the confidence in your voice when you corrected Marcus about market trends. You knew things you shouldn't know. And now that you know the truth, what do you plan to do with it?" Brandon was quiet for a long moment, staring at the lights reflecting on the water. "I don't know. Maya has no idea, does she?" "None." "Why? Why keep it a secret?" Audrey stood up, preparing to leave. "Because the moment people know who I really am, everything changes. They stop seeing me as a person and start seeing me as an opportunity. They calculate my worth before they calculate my character." "But Maya's your sister. She loves you." "Maya loves the version of me that makes her feel superior, the version that sacrifices everything so she can play dress-up with people who look down on us both." As Audrey walked away, Brandon called after her. "What happens tomorrow night?" "Tomorrow night," Audrey said without turning around, "everyone finds out who they've been mocking." The game was almost over, and Audrey Ortiz was about to reveal her hand. The only question was whether Maya and her friends were ready for the consequences of underestimating the woman who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Sister's friends mocked my job until they Googled my name and found my Forbes cover. Part 5. The Calm Before the Storm. The morning of the gala dawned gray and drizzly, as if the weather itself was reflecting the tension that had been building for weeks. Audrey woke before her alarm, her mind already racing through the events that would unfold in the next 12 hours. By tonight, her carefully guarded secret would be public knowledge, and nothing would ever be the same.
Maya was still asleep, her borrowed gala dress hanging pristinely on the closet door, like a symbol of everything she thought she wanted. Audrey made coffee and sat at the small kitchen table, watching the rain streak down the windows while she waited for the call that would change everything. At exactly 6 a.m., her secure phone rang. "It's done," Jennifer Walsh said without preamble. "The Forbes article goes live at 8 a.m. Eastern, full feature spread, cover story. The Billionaire Next Door, How Audrey Ortiz Built an Empire While Fixing Cars." Audrey felt her stomach drop. Cover story? Rebecca Martinez convinced the editorial board. Apparently, your sister walking into that auto shop yesterday was exactly the human interest angle they needed. The contrast between your public persona and private reality is exactly what makes this story so compelling. What about the photo? Please tell me they didn't use anything from the shop. No, we used the corporate headshots from last year's board retreat. But Audrey, there's something else. The Wall Street Journal is running a companion piece this morning, and CNN wants to do a live interview segment tonight after the gala. Tonight? That's impossible. I need time to... There is no more time. By noon today, every major news outlet in the country will know who you are. The cat's not just out of the bag, it's holding a press conference. After hanging up, Audrey sat in the quiet apartment, listening to Maya's peaceful breathing from the next room. In 2 hours, her sister would wake up to discover that her embarrassing mechanic sister was front-page news across the business world. The irony was suffocating. At Murphy's Auto Repair, Tom was already fielding phone calls when Audrey arrived for what she knew would be her last day as just another mechanic. "Audrey, thank God you're here. I've had reporters calling since 7 o'clock, asking about you in Forbes magazine. What the hell is going on?" "Tom, we need to talk." They sat in his cluttered office while Audrey explained everything: the company, the acquisitions, the 3 years of living a double life. Tom listened without interruption, his weathered face cycling through disbelief, understanding, and finally a kind of proud resignation. "Well, I'll be damned," he said finally. "I always knew you were too smart for this place, but this, Jesus, Audrey, you're telling me I've had a billionaire changing oil in my shop for 3 years? I'm telling you that you gave me the most honest work I've ever done, and the most peaceful." What happens now? I mean, after today, you can't exactly come back to replacing brake pads. I don't know. Everything changes now. Tom nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, you've been the best employee I've ever had, and probably the most expensive one, considering what your hourly rate should have been." At 8 a.m. sharp, Audrey's phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media alerts. The Forbes article had gone live, and the world was reacting exactly as she'd feared. The article was everywhere. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Every major news app was sharing and discussing the story of the mysterious billionaire who had been hiding in plain sight all along. The photos showed her in a shark business suit from a corporate Photoshop, looking every inch the powerful executive she actually was. But it was the headline that made her hands shake. "The Billionaire Mechanic: How Audrey Ortiz Fooled Everyone, Including Her Own Family." Maya woke up to her phone buzzing incessantly with calls from her university friends. She answered groggily, not bothering to look at the caller ID. "Maya, oh my God, are you seeing this?" Sophia's voice was high-pitched with excitement and disbelief. "What? Sophia, what are you talking about?" "Check your phone. Check the news. Maya, your sister isn't a mechanic. She's a billionaire. She owns like half the company in the city." Maya sat up in bed, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. She fumbled for her laptop, typing her sister's name into Google with shaking fingers. The search results were overwhelming. Forbes, Wall Street Journal, CNN Business, Bloomberg. Every major publication had picked up the story, and Audrey's face was everywhere. "Maya? Maya, are you there?" Sophia's voice seemed to come from very far away. Maya read the Forbes headline with growing horror. At 26, Audrey Ortiz has quietly built a $3.2 billion empire while working as a mechanic to support her younger sister through college, but her family had no idea who she really was. Her phone kept buzzing. Brandon was calling. Marcus was calling. Even people she barely knew from university were trying to reach her. But Maya couldn't answer. She could barely breathe. Her sister, her poor, embarrassing blue-collar sister, was one of the richest people in America. At the Grandview Country Club, preparations for the evening's gala were taking on a distinctly different tone. Word had spread quickly through the city's elite social circles, and what was supposed to be a routine charity event had suddenly become the most anticipated gathering of the year. "Have you seen the Forbes article?" Senator Richardson's aide whispered to the mayor's chief of staff as they reviewed the evening's guest list. "Seen it? I've had 3 meetings canceled this morning because everyone wants to figure out how to get closer to Audrey Ortiz. Do we know if she's actually attending tonight?" Her office confirmed it an hour ago, first public appearance since the story broke. Meanwhile, in a private dining room at the country club, Brandon sat across from Sophia and Marcus. The Forbes article spread across the table between them like evidence at a crime scene. "I can't believe this is real," Sophia said for the 10th time. "All those times we made jokes about her job, about her clothes, about her... God, we must have looked like such idiots." "Speak for yourself," Marcus said, though his usual confidence was notably absent. "I always thought there was something different about her." "No, you didn't," Brandon said quietly. "None of us did. We saw what we wanted to see." "What does this mean for tonight?" Sophia asked. "I mean, we're still going to the gala, right? Maya's still our friend?" Brandon looked at his friends. These people he'd grown up with, shared classes with, planned futures with, and realized how small they all suddenly seemed. "Maya doesn't know," he said. "According to the article, her sister never told her." "How is that possible?" Marcus leaned forward. "You don't accidentally hide being worth $3 billion. You do, if you want to protect someone from becoming the person we became when we thought we were special." The room fell silent as the implication hit them. They weren't special. They had never been special. They were just kids with trust funds who had spent years mocking someone who could have bought and sold all their families without thinking twice about it. "She played us," Sophia said, but there was no anger in her voice, just a kind of awed respect. "She sat there while we talked down to her, and she never said a word." "She didn't play us," Brandon corrected. "We played ourselves." As the afternoon wore on, the media frenzy intensified. News vans were setting up outside Murphy's Auto Repair. Financial analysts were debating Audrey's investment strategies on live television. Social media was exploding with reactions ranging from admiration to outrage to complete disbelief. But in the small apartment above the laundromat, 2 sisters sat in silence. The Forbes article opened between them like a chasm neither knew how to cross. Maya had cried, then raged, then cried again. Now she just stared at the photos of her sister looking powerful and confident in ways Maya had never imagined possible. "How long?" Maya finally asked. "How long have you been lying to me?" 3 years, Audrey said quietly, "since the day you started at Riverside." "Why?" "Because I wanted you to have a normal college experience. Because I didn't want you to feel guilty about the money or different from your friends. Because I thought it would be easier." "Easier for who?" Audrey met her sister's eyes. "For both of us." Outside, the first news van pulled up to the curb. Soon, their quiet street would be invaded by reporters, cameramen, and curiosity seekers. The life they had built together, complicated and painful as it was ending. Tonight, at the Grandview Country Club, Audrey Ortiz would step into the spotlight she had avoided for 3 years. And when she did, everyone who had underestimated her would finally understand the magnitude of their mistake. The calm before the storm was over. The storm was about to begin. The Grandview Country Club had never seen anything like it.
By 6 p.m., the circular drive was clogged with news vans, paparazzi, and curious onlookers trying to catch a glimpse of the evening's most anticipated guest. What was supposed to be an elegant charity gala had transformed into a media circuit, with security guards struggling to maintain order as reporters shouted questions at every arriving guest. Inside the grand ballroom, the atmosphere was electric with nervous energy. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as people checked their phones for updates, and every entrance was scrutinized to see if Audrey Ortiz had finally arrived. Maya stood in the ladies' room, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. The borrowed Cartier earrings felt heavy against her neck, and the elegant black dress that had seemed so perfect that morning now felt like a costume she had no right to wear. Her hands shook as she applied lipstick, trying to steady herself for what was about to unfold. "Maya?" Sophia's voice echoed in the marble-tiled room. "Are you okay? You've been in here for 20 minutes." Maya turned to face her friend, this person who had spent months looking down on her sister, and felt a surge of anger she'd never experienced before. "Am I okay? Sophia, I just found out that my sister, the woman you've been calling a lowly mechanic for months, could probably buy your mother's boutique with her pocket change. So no, I'm not okay." Sophia flinched. "Maya, we didn't know. How could we have known?" "You didn't want to know. None of you did. You were too busy feeling superior." Before Sophia could respond, the bathroom door swung open, and Marcus's girlfriend Jessica rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. "She's here," Jessica announced breathlessly. "Audrey just arrived, and it's insane out there. She came in a black Tesla, no driver, no security detail, nothing. Just walked right through the front door like she owned the place."
Maya's heart stopped. She's actually here? The whole ballroom is buzzing. I've never seen anything like it. Senator Richardson practically sprinted over to introduce himself, and the mayor looked like he was going to faint. Maya pushed past them both, her borrowed heels clicking on the marble floor as she made her way toward the ballroom. She had to see this for herself, had to see her sister in this world that Maya had been so desperate to join. The ballroom fell silent as Maya entered. Not completely silent, conversations continued in hushed whispers, but the energy had shifted, focused on the woman standing near the silent auction tables, examining charity items with the same careful attention she'd once given to car engines. Audrey had transformed. Gone were the grease-stained work clothes and ponytail. Instead, she wore a midnight blue evening gown that probably cost more than Maya's entire college education, her hair styled in an elegant updo that showcased diamond earrings that made Sophia's borrowed Cartier look like costume jewelry. But it wasn't just the clothes or the jewelry that made her look different. It was the way she carried herself. Confident, commanding, like she belonged in this world of power and privilege more than any of them ever could. "Jesus," Brandon whispered, appearing beside Maya. "She looks like exactly who she's always been," Maya finished quietly. "We just weren't paying attention." Across the room, Audrey was surrounded by a growing circle of the city's most influential people. The mayor, Senator Richardson, the presidents of 3 major universities, and CEOs whose companies Maya had only read about in business magazines. They weren't just talking to her, they were deferring to her, hanging on her every word like disciples seeking wisdom from a guru. "Miss Ortiz," Senator Richardson was saying, his voice carrying across the room, "I had no idea you were behind the infrastructure improvements in the downtown district. The impact on local employment has been remarkable." "Economic development only works when it benefits the community, not just the investors," Audrey replied, her voice calm and authoritative. "Too many people focus on quarterly profits instead of sustainable growth." Maya watched her sister, this woman she thought she knew, hold court with politicians and business leaders like she'd been born to it. Every gesture, every response, every slight smile demonstrated a level of sophistication and knowledge that Maya was only beginning to comprehend. I can't believe she was wasting her time fixing cars, Marcus said, joining their small group of observers. She could have been running for office or heading a major corporation, or she was heading a major corporation, Brandon interrupted. Multiple corporations, actually. She just chose to spend her days doing something else. The realization hit them all at the same time. Audrey hadn't been stuck in a dead-end job because she lacked options or intelligence or ambition. She had chosen to work as a mechanic while simultaneously running a billion-dollar empire. The dedication, the skill, the sheer mental capacity required to maintain such a double life was staggering. Why? Sophia asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. Why would she do that to herself? Maya knew the answer, even if she didn't want to admit it. Audrey had done it for her. Every oil change, every 12-hour shift, every moment of enduring their condescension, it had all been to protect Maya's college experience, to let her sister live a normal life without the complications that came with extraordinary wealth. The guilt was overwhelming. "Excuse me," said a voice behind them. They turned to see Rebecca Martinez, the Forbes journalist, approaching with a photographer in tow. "You're Maya Ortiz, aren't you, Audrey's sister?" Maya's throat felt dry. "Yes. I'm Rebecca Martinez. I wrote the Forbes piece about your sister. I was wondering if we could get a few photos of you together. The human interest angle of this story is really resonating with our readers." I don't think that's a good idea right now." Rebecca's eyes lit up with professional interest. "Is there tension between you two? The article mentioned that you were unaware of her business activities. That must have been quite a shock." "It was," Maya admitted before she could stop herself. "How does it feel, discovering that the sister you've been living with is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country?" Maya looked across the room at Audrey, who was now speaking with the head of the local chamber of commerce while simultaneously checking something on her phone. Even in this moment of triumph, she was working, managing details, taking care of business with the same quiet competence she'd shown while fixing brake pads. "It feels like I never knew her at all," Maya said quietly. The photographer started to raise his camera, but Maya shook her head. "Please don't. Not yet." As Rebecca and the photographer moved away, Maya found herself walking toward her sister, drawn by a mixture of curiosity, guilt, and a desperate need to understand. The crowd around her parted as she approached, recognizing her from the photos that were now circulating on social media. "Maya," Audrey said, turning toward her with a careful smile, "you look beautiful. The dress fits perfectly." "We need to talk," Maya said, ignoring the dozen pairs of eyes watching their interaction with undisguised fascination. "Of course, but maybe somewhere more private." They made their way to a quiet corner of the ballroom, near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the country club's golf course. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond this bubble of wealth and privilege. "I keep waiting to wake up," Maya said finally. "Keep thinking this is some kind of elaborate joke." "It's not a joke." 3 years, Audrey. 3 years you let me think we were struggling. 3 years you let me complain while you were sitting on billions of dollars." Audrey was quiet for a moment, watching the reporters outside trying to peer through the windows. "I wanted you to have choices based on who you are, not what I have." "That wasn't your decision to make." "Wasn't it? I'm your legal guardian. I've been taking care of you since you were 19. "Taking care of me?" Maya's voice rose slightly, causing several nearby conversations to pause. "You've been lying to me. There's a difference." Audrey met her sister's eyes, and for the first time all evening, her carefully composed mask slipped slightly. "I've been protecting you." "From what? From knowing that my sister is successful? From being proud of what you've accomplished?" "From becoming the kind of person who judges others based on their bank account," Audrey said quietly. "From turning into someone who thinks money determines worth." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She thought about the past few months, her embarrassment about Audrey's job, her eagerness to distance herself from their poor background, her willingness to let her friends mock the person who had sacrificed everything for her education. "I became that person anyway," Maya whispered. Before Audrey could respond, a commotion near the ballroom entrance caught their attention. Brandon, Sophia, and Marcus were approaching, their faces pale but determined. "Audrey," Brandon said, his voice uncharacteristically humble, Could we talk to you for a minute?" Audrey looked at the three young people who had spent months treating her like an object of pity and amusement. They stood before her now with the kind of nervous energy typically reserved for job interviews or court appearances. "Of course," she said graciously. The reckoning had begun, and for the first time in 3 years, Audrey Ortiz was ready to let the people who had underestimated her see exactly what that mistake had cost them. The silence that followed Brandon's request stretched for what felt like an eternity. Around them, the gala continued, glasses clinked, conversations hummed, and the charity auction proceeded. But in their small circle near the windows, time seemed suspended. Audrey studied the three faces before her. Brandon, whose family's hotel chain she could have acquired with a phone call. Sophia, whose mother's boutique represented a single day's revenue for her smallest subsidiary. And Marcus, whose Harvard Law School dreams suddenly seemed quaint compared to the legal empire she'd built behind the scenes. "What would you like to talk about?" Audrey asked, her voice perfectly calm. Brandon stepped forward slightly, his usual confidence replaced by something Maya had never seen before, genuine humility. "We owe you an apology," he began, "not just for tonight or last week or any specific incident, for everything. For the way we treated you, the things we said, the assumptions we made." "You treated me exactly as you saw me," Audrey replied. "A mechanic, someone beneath your social circle." "That's not," Sophia started, then stopped herself. "Actually, that's exactly what we did. We judged you based on your job, your clothes, your perceived status." Marcus, who had always been the most vocal in his disdain, looked like he was struggling with something far more complex than a simple apology. "I keep thinking about that night at dinner," he said quietly, "when I made that joke about you smelling like motor oil. Everyone laughed, including Maya, and you just sat there. You didn't defend yourself or get angry or storm out." "What would have been the point?" Audrey asked. "The point would have been putting us in our place. The point would have been showing us how wrong we were." Audrey glanced at Maya, then back at Marcus. "And what would that have accomplished? You would have been humiliated, Maya would have been embarrassed by the connection to me, and nothing would have been learned." "But you let us think we were superior to you," Sophia protested. "For months, we acted like we were doing Maya a favor by tolerating her working-class background." "You were doing Maya a favor," Audrey said simply. "You were her friend. Flawed, immature friends who had a lot of growing up to do, but friends nonetheless." Brandon shook his head in disbelief. "How can you be so calm about this? We mocked you, dismissed you, treated you like you were invisible." "Because in many ways, I wanted to be invisible. The moment people know what I'm worth, everything changes. Conversations become networking opportunities, friendships become strategic alliances. Genuine human connection becomes nearly impossible." Maya, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke up. "Is that why you never told me? Because you thought I'd change?" Audrey turned to her sister, and for the first time all evening, her composed mask slipped completely. "I told myself it was to protect you," she said softly. "But honestly, I was terrified that you'd start seeing me the way everyone else does, as a bank account instead of a person, as an opportunity instead of a sister." "But I became someone worse," Maya said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I became someone who was ashamed of you, someone who wanted to hide who you were because it didn't fit the image I wanted to project." The weight of that admission settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Here was the real tragedy. Not that Audrey had hidden her wealth, but that Maya had been embarrassed by her sister's honest work, while that same sister was secretly supporting her entire lifestyle. "Maya," Audrey said gently, "you were 22 years old, thrust into a world where image matters more than substance. You were trying to find your place. Stop making excuses for me, Maya interrupted, her voice cracking. Stop protecting me from the consequences of my own actions. I chose to be embarrassed by you. I chose to let my friends mock you. I chose to ask you to lie about your job because it didn't sound prestigious enough. She turned to face Brandon, Sophia, and Marcus, her borrowed elegance now seeming like a costume that no longer fit. And you three, you spent months making me feel like I was lucky to be included in your group despite my unfortunate family situation, like you were being charitable by accepting me. Maya, that's not how we meant, Sophia began. Yes, it is, Maya cut her off. That's exactly how you meant it. And I went along with it because I wanted to belong somewhere more than I wanted to defend my sister. The conversation was interrupted by the approach of Rebecca Martinez, the Forbes journalist who had been hovering nearby with her photographer. Excuse me, Rebecca said, but I couldn't help overhearing. This is exactly the kind of authentic moment our readers would love to see. The human side of success, family dynamics, the cost of keeping secrets. No, Audrey said firmly. This is a private conversation. But surely you understand the public interest. I understand that my family's personal struggles are not entertainment for your readers, Audrey replied, her voice carrying the kind of authority that ended conversations. Please respect that. Rebecca retreated, but not before Maya caught the calculating look in her eyes. This story was far from over in the media's perspective. What happens now? Brandon asked. I mean, after tonight, everything's different. Audrey looked around the ballroom, at the politicians who now wanted her endorsement, the business leaders seeking her investment, the socialites angling for invitations to exclusive events. Now I go back to being who I always been, she said. The only difference is that it's no longer a secret. But the mechanic thing, Marcus started.
Tom gave me 2 weeks' notice this afternoon, Audrey said with a slight smile. Apparently, having a billionaire on the payroll is bad for business. Too many reporters want interviews while customers just want their oil changed. So that's it? Maya asked. You just transitioned back to being a CEO full-time? I was never not a CEO, Maya. I was just also a mechanic. Some of the best decisions I made for my companies came while I was lying under a car, thinking through problems without the pressure of boardrooms and quarterly reports. Sophia looked genuinely puzzled. But why? Why choose to do both when you could have just not? Audrey considered the question, gazing out at the city lights beyond the country club's manicured grounds. Because the work was real, she said finally. When someone's car broke down and I fixed it, they drove away with a solved problem. There was immediate, tangible value in what I did. In the corporate world, success is often abstract. Numbers on spreadsheets, market share percentages, theoretical value creation. But when you fix someone's transmission, you've actually helped them get to work, pick up their kids, live their life. You could have helped people in bigger ways, Brandon pointed out. Charity foundations, social programs, economic development. I do all of that too, Audrey replied. But it's easier to feel connected to your impact when you can see it immediately. When Catherine Morrison needed her Tesla fixed so she wouldn't miss her investor presentation, I didn't just save her company. I saw the relief on her face when the repair was done. Maya wiped her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for all of it, for being ashamed of you, for letting them talk about you like that, for caring more about what strangers thought than about what you were sacrificing for me. You don't need to apologize for being young and making mistakes, Audrey said. Yes, I do, and they do too. Brandon nodded seriously. She's right, we all do. Audrey, I know an apology doesn't undo months of disrespect, but I am genuinely sorry. Not because of who you turned out to be, but because of how we treated who we thought you were. The mechanical version of you deserved better from us, Sophia added. And honestly, looking back, she was always the most interesting person in the room. We were just too wrapped up in ourselves to notice. Marcus, who had been silent, finally spoke up. I've been thinking about something you said earlier, about judging people based on bank accounts. We did that, but in reverse. We dismissed you because we thought you didn't have money. which is just as shallow as respecting someone only because they do have money. Wisdom often comes from uncomfortable realizations, Audrey observed. As the evening wound down, the gala began to empty. Politicians and business leaders approached Audrey throughout the night, but she had handled each interaction with the same grace, professional but not overly accommodating, acknowledging their interest without committing to anything. "Will you go back to the apartment tonight?" asked as they prepared to leave. "For now, though I suspect our quiet little street is about to become significantly less quiet." They were right. Outside the country club, photographers waited behind velvet ropes while security guards ensured a clear path to the valet station. Audrey's Tesla appeared, looking modest compared to the parade of luxury vehicles that had preceded it. "Miss Ortiz," reporters shouted, "what's next for AO Industries? Will you be making any major acquisitions? How does it feel to finally go public?" Audrey paused at her car door, looking back at the scene. The flashing cameras, the shouted questions, the crowd of people suddenly desperate for her attention. "It feels," she said loudly enough for the microphones to pick up, "exactly like I expected it would." 6 months later, Maya graduated from Riverside University with a degree in business administration and a job offer from a mid-sized consulting firm, a position she'd earned through her own merit, not through her connection to her famous sister. Brandon had transferred to a state school, choosing to finish his education without his father's financial support. Sophia was working at her mother's boutique, learning the retail business from the ground up. Marcus had deferred Harvard for a year to work with a legal aid organization, discovering that law could be about helping people rather than just accumulating power. And Audrey Ortiz, no longer the billionaire next door, but simply the billionaire, continued to run her empire while occasionally stopping by Murphy's Auto Repair to help Tom with particularly challenging repairs. Because some things she had learned were worth keeping, even when everything else changed. The world now knew who Audrey Ortiz really was, but more importantly, the people who mattered most had learned who they really were and who they wanted to become. Sometimes, the most valuable education comes not from what you learn about others, but from what you discover about yourself when you realize how wrong you've been. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.